It's 8 o'clock on a Sunday night. It's time for the Bible Forum. I'm Warren Sprouse. I'm your host and your guide for the next couple of hours. Just doing what I do before we get started. Some of you can tune in early. I was told by professionals that when you do an online program, you really should start the stream early. That way people know you're going to be there. What I find is that when I do that, then the people who are there get to see everything I'm doing and the testing and all the rest of it. And I got in a little bit late this evening from church, so I had some issues that I had to work out. Anyway, we're here. We're going to spend the next couple of hours together. We've got a full, plate of things to talk about. One of the big items that is on the agenda is the ever-present Brexit. We'll talk a little bit about what that means. We're also going to talk about the United States Supreme Court. They had some rulings came down. I don't know if it was late last week or early this week, several of them. One in particular had to do with the United States Constitution. And while the court split 4-4 because Scalia is gone, the thing that amazed me the most were the 4 people who actually voted against the Constitution. These are the people, court of last resort, and they voted against our founding documents. We're going to look a little bit, not too much, about how Mexico handles their illegal immigrant situation. They handle it a little bit differently than we do, and it's appropriate because of the Supreme Court decision. And so we'll tie those two things together and make an issue. Planned Parenthood is back in the news. They have a new ally. Not sure they're happy with it, but we'll talk about that a little bit. We also have a situation where if you are a retired military type person, I guess it wouldn't matter who you are, but in this particular illustration, a retired military type person was asked to speak at a military funeral, in part because he had done this for several years and he has a good voice, resonant, people can understand him and so forth, and he would do a good job. And he stood up there and he didn't last 5-7 minutes, and there were military people came out of the audience and physically grabbed him and ushered him out of the room. Not military police, just military types. And it was all because of what he said. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Some of you are old, like me, and you probably read George Orwell's 1984. Young people don't even know what that is. They've never heard of Orwell. They've never heard of 1984. It's part and parcel of our so-called public education today that we don't get this sort of thing anymore. We're going to talk about it because Orwell's nightmare is now our reality. And we're going to look at it in a very specific way. We're finding out that the bathroom situation is not the transgender's biggest problem. No, not at all. They've got an even larger problem with that, other than that, and we're going to talk about that. The lost city of Petra is back on the radar screen. It ties in with biblical eschatology. Eschatology is the doctrine of final things. And the lost city of Petra was in a famous movie, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Indiana Jones. You've probably seen it. Is back in the news. They've discovered some more stuff over there. And so we'll talk about that all in harmony with end times kinds of things. And then we've got a rally. I don't know what they're calling it. some kind of an event that's going to take place. I think it's in September. We'll know more when I get to that part of the program and I can actually read what I wrote. But I'm characterizing this as ecumenism on steroids. You know, there was a time in this country when a Roman Catholic could not get elected to office. John Kennedy broke that mold, being elected President of the United States. But prior to that, coming up through, Catholics just were not going to get elected. And that's because the Constitution was based on the Bible. Catholicism is not. I don't want to upset you too much. I'd like to upset you enough that you take a look at it. But now we have Baptists and Catholics getting together to hold a religious, so-called Christian rally. I call it ecumenism on steroids. I want you to be a part of the program. If you want to get involved, we have the phone lines open at 843-732-0249. 843-732-0249. We have our chat room open. We've got all our regulars in the chat room. We've got about a third of the people. They show me numbers. It tells me who's around. About a third of the people are here. Not everybody shows up at 8 o'clock. When I was doing the show in Wilmington on the radio, I lost a friend over this. Maybe if I lost him, he wasn't much of a friend. I don't know. But there was a time when I think it was Easter. Yeah, it was Easter. And I didn't mention Easter in the first half hour. And my friend called me on the phone, and he was not happy. And he criticized me. He was mean in his tone of voice and in what he said. Didn't know why we weren't talking about Easter and blah, 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 blah. And I told him, I said, the audience doesn't show up until 8:30. We planned it to talk about it at the 8:30 segment. He didn't want to hear anything, and he hung up. And you know, I've never heard from him since. Never heard from him since. We used to go out and eat at least once a month. I took him places. We had time together. He called the show on a regular basis. People write every once in a while, whatever happened to so-and-so? I have no idea. I really don't know what that was about. I'm assuming that it had more to do with embarrassment than it did anything else, but you know, it takes something. But that's the whole point. The audience tends not to show up until 8:30. And it isn't like I do stuff that's not important, but I leave stuff I really would like for you to hear till after that. And usually more like 9 o'clock. From 9 to 10 is when I do the controversial kinds of things. Anyway, do you get my email? I hope you do. I want you to sign up to get that. We send that out every Saturday morning. Some color pictures and all the rest of it. If you're on the list, you've already gotten it. Not everybody opens their email. I mean, they get a report. I send out hundreds of these things, and there's about 30% of them get opened. Everybody sees them, but do they actually click the email to look at it? Only about 30% do. Fewer than that click the links and go to the websites and check out any of the things that are going on. I'm watching you. I keep my eyes on you. Bible Institute is moving ahead. I'm working on lesson number 6, doctrine number 6. We've got some folks that are just now finishing up, I think, doctrine number 3. I believe it's number 3. So if you want to be involved in that, all you have to do is go to the website. You can do it right from where you are. On the Bible Forum website, there's a link, or you can go to the Bible Institute website, BibleInstituteofCharleston.org. It's orange. This is kind of a blue thing. That's kind of an orange thing. When you get my email and I talk about it, it's in orange print. We're trying to stay consistent. But doctrine is very, very important. We're working through the 10 basic Bible doctrines. If you don't understand those, the rest of it won't make a whole lot of sense. If you don't understand the very first doctrine that we talk about, the doctrine of Bible interpretation, if you do not know how to interpret not just the Bible, but if you do not know how to interpret words on a page, you are going to have some serious problems in life. But when you come to the Bible, you're going to miss out on a great deal. Much of what we are having in our world that's crazy is because people are taking tremendous liberties with the written language. And they're reading our Constitution, or they're reading the laws from years ago, or they're just reading even things today. And they're not using the laws, the rules of interpretation. They're getting into a free verse thing. Well, I think that means this. It doesn't matter what you think it means. It only means what it meant to the person who wrote it. And so you have to get into their head. And in order to do that, there are some rules. And we go over those in our first lesson on Bible doctrine. We'll talk about how to interpret those words on the page. We watched this week as Great Britain exited the European Union. One of the things that fascinated me were the comments that were made by people who actually did the voting. Many of these people had no idea what they were voting on. Some of them voted to get out, but they didn't really want to. They just did that because they didn't think it mattered. And now they're upset. What were the issues that were at work here? Well, Jeremy Corbyn, who's a leader in the Labour Party, over there Labour Party means liberals. The Prime Minister, the current Prime Minister, is in the Labour Party. He's a liberal. They said people should vote to stay in the European Union because it lets them be gay and lesbian. If we're out of the EU, you won't get to do that. And there's some reality involved there. It isn't that it lets you be gay and lesbian, but the liberals, they put those people on a higher pedestal than ordinary people. Conservatives tend not to do that. He was referencing the governing principles of the European Union. He praised the European Convention of Human Rights, which the EU and Britain have incorporated into their own law, and suggested that basic rights would be under threat if Britain votes to leave. He said our right to free speech, our right to express ourselves, our right to be lesbian, to be gay, to be straight, whatever you want to be, it is very important. And at the same time, he admits that Britain will never be able to cap immigration while it remains within the European Union. So you can be free to be whatever you want to be, but you will cease to be Great Britain if it continues, because the immigrants are going to flood in there like they have other places, and they're going to create chaos and eventually take over your country. You say, oh, no, that's their plan. Read about it. But that's not really a problem for a lot of these people, because the very principle of a single market across Europe is the free movement of people. If you have the free movement of capital, you have the free movement of people. Restricting immigration from the European Union would, quote, defeat the whole point, end of quote, of the single market. At the same time, he went on to praise German Chancellor Angela Merkel for her human response as opposed to the inhuman response of voting out. In opening Germany's borders to migrants last summer, a decision that has led to over 1 million people entering that country. an untold number of horrendous deaths at the hands of these immigrants. Around 2.6 million migrants are predicted to come to the UK in the next 15 years if it stayed in the EU. That's on top of at least 1.6 million who have already arrived just in the last 10 years. A leaked government report in April admitted that EU migration was damaging social cohesion and having a disproportionate impact on Britain. The report said that while well-educated Eastern Europeans are, quote, overrepresented in low-skill sectors in the UK, thus pushing out less well-educated Britons. This was a major issue for Great Britain. It's a major issue in every country that has been overwhelmed by what we are euphemistically referring to as immigrants. These are actually refugees and Islamic fifth columnists. The crime statistics following these people are horrific. The housing issues are impossible, with one Scandinavian country forcing people who have a vacation home or some other extra domicile somewhere, a second home of some sort, forcing them to allow these folks to live in their house free of charge. Will the exit destroy the European Union? We can only hope, but it probably will not. Several countries, however, notably Spain, Italy, France, Sweden, Poland, Germany, Hungary, and there are a lot of lesser, not lesser in value, but lesser in terms of statistics of people who want to get out. These people have a significant number of citizens who want to vote on getting out. Only Italy and France have more than 50% of their population asking for this. Germany has been propping up the European Union for years, but Germany is now running out of money. And if it weren't for the flood of Muslims fleeing Syria and Iraq, the European Union might very well have continued. In a CNBC TV interview Friday, Alan Greenspan, former chairman of the Federal Reserve, warned that the UK vote to leave the European Union threatens to usher in an economic crisis, as he put it, worse even than the darkest days of October 1987. Greenspan stressed that the euro currency is the immediate problem, with the debt of the southern tier of the eurozone, Spain, Italy, Greece, currently being financed by the northern countries and the European Central Bank. The widely read economic blog, zerohedge.com, pointed out that, quote, Greenspan was referring to the unprecedented combination of economic stagnation, deteriorating demographics, insolvent entitlement programs, social inequality and wealth division, and of course the historic debt, the debt overhang, which could and should have been cleared out in the crash of 2008. But it was instead preserved by the wisdom of the economic gurus. They did it to avoid wiping out the same, what they call equity holders, who also happen to be the Fed's direct and indirect stakeholders. Yeah, they were looking out for their own. Now, the idea of a unified Europe has been the dream of globalists for over 1,000 years. Think Charlemagne, 800 AD, emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, which is what we now call Europe. Lady Europa in mythology rides the beast on a statue in front of European Union headquarters in Belgium. This beast is it looks like a bull. This beast is a symbol for Zeus. Zeus was king of the gods, the elitists who ran the world. Mythology says he lured Europa onto his back and immediately plunged into the sea with her, where he proceeded to rape her. By using this analogy of a lady riding the beast as a symbol for the EU, the elitists are telling us that the plan of their master, Zeus, or Satan in this case, Lucifer, is to seduce Europa, and ultimately to dominate it. We also see the same legend promoted on coins, on posters, in artwork all throughout the EU. Some examples are posted on the website. A €2 coin, for example, was released in Greece that depicts a woman riding a beast. In the Bible, in Revelation chapter 2, we have this beast residing in Pergamum. The Bible says this is where Satan's throne is. And you ask yourself, what's so special about Pergamum? Well, that's where the great altar of Pergamum, or Pergamon, was. And history tells us about this altar. History tells us the great altar of Pergamon, a massive stone podium about 100 feet long and 35 feet high, was originally built in the 2nd century BC in the ancient Greek city of Pergamon, modern-day Bergama in Turkey, in northwestern Anatolia, about 16 miles from the Aegean Sea. The great altar of Pergamon was figured in lists of the wonders of the world. It has long been assumed that the magnificently scaled and opulently decorated open-air altar, it's not a temple, was dedicated to Zeus. It was the gigantic altar of Zeus that Jesus was likely referring to. Biblically, it seems reasonable to assume the man of sin and later the Antichrist will move to consolidate Europe as part of his confederation, using it to take control of the money flow and establish his own religion. And this will all be done in an effort to dominate the world. What effect will Great Britain's departure have? Well, it's possible that this move will so damage the economic structure as to create a global emergency, one which will embolden ISIS and/or Turkey and/or Russia. If that happens, the world is going to cry out for a leader, for a solution. Or this whole thing could drag on for, another 50 years. The Bible is not clear on the timing. A lot of the things that happen in the Bible seem to happen in a moment, a few months, a few weeks, and we find they take 1,000 years. So this all could come unglued and start a real cascade of biblical proportion, or this could last for another several hundred years. We really don't know. It's interesting to look at it, and for those of us who care, it's important to pay attention.